Perfect. All right. Very good. So welcome everyone to the talk. So the talk will be about failure culture, and this is me. I'm Anke, and I hate failing. Anyway, the only way to live is by failing along, by detecting failure early, by detecting failure fast. It's something we already heard in the talks from Michaela and also Edwin and Maerz. And yeah, so what you see there on the picture is me knees deep in mud at the Ordina Muddy Angel Run last year. In a way, you know, you're cold, you're muddy. Yeah, how low can life get? But as you see, I'm also having a ton of fun. So yeah, let's see what failure can actually mean. Actually, yes, failure also became more relevant to me in my career when I became a Scrum Master, and that is now about 5 to 6 years ago. All right, let's have a look. What does failure mean? And I looked that actually up in the English Oxford Dictionary, and failure is the fact of someone or something not succeeding. The meeting was a complete, total failure. I'm a bit of a failure at making cakes. I feel such a failure. I feel so unsuccessful. That would be examples. I find it an interesting definition because already in the definition, it's phrased in a negative way. Yeah? So you have the not in there. So it's really difficult to find a definition of failure that is actually positively written. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sure we are all, yeah, we have all occurred already some situations where we felt there was a failure involved. And I would like to invite you to share your earliest memory of a situation where either you or someone else failed. And you have different options to share these memories, either not, that's totally okay, or in the chat, or in the audio, or in the video. Really brave. You can also turn on the video and tell us your story. Anyone?
Okay, I'll answer. The earliest one I know is the one my parents told me, that when I was a baby, I was failing to fall asleep every night, and they were very troubled by that.
Okay, so yeah, well, that is of course a failure that is probably difficult for you to remember, I assume.
Yes,
so,
I have no recollection of it.
Yes, well, that's good. Okay, then we have in the chat, going on a bike trip with my older brothers, but the 3 to 4 years difference was way too big and I had to return after 3 road turns. Wow. Yes, that I can imagine also feeling like failure, yeah. And Michaela, you had something in the chat, in the video. But we don't hear you, you're mute.
Yeah, I wanted to relate to you my earliest memory of trying a bicycle and falling into a hedge full of little thorns. Yes, absolutely. I remember it vividly.
And do you still remember how that felt?
Yeah, sure. I think I do. Yeah, I think I do. I think it was a mixture of embarrassment and pain and wanting to stop.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, something painful that we might not even ever forget. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other examples that you want to share? We can have 1 or 2 more. Okay, otherwise it's also fine, of course, like this. Okay, so well, now maybe before we continue, I have another question for you, because yeah, I joined Michaela's and Edwin's and Maerz' presentations earlier on, and we already had a lot about yeah, what does it mean to be agile? Why is failing important? So we have two courses of actions. We can either follow my presentation, where I also did a little bit of research on failed and successful projects, and look what they have in common and where they are different. Albeit, the the conclusions are rather similar to what Michaela and Edwin and Maris found, but you will see the data from a different angle. Or we can go a little bit faster through that point and to look and instead take more time on looking into what is the psychology of failure. Why is it so difficult for us to allow for it and to see it as something that brings us value. So I would love to hear your reactions, either in the chat again or in audio. All right. So people vote for option 2. That's fine. I will anyway go just a little bit through the examples. Yes, we are going for option 2. It's okay. Thanks. I'll anyway go a little bit through the examples, but I'm not going to share all of them and jump to the conclusions rather quickly. So some examples that I found that I researched already back in Germany, because that's where I'm from. I only joined Belgium and Ordina last year. I did some research from the Gesellschaft für Projektmanagement, so the Society for Project Management, and I looked at some projects that they classified as failed. And in a business context, of course, what does it mean for a project to fail? What is easiest to measure? It's how long does it take? How much budget does it cost? And does it in the end fulfill the requirements? And I'll just show the pictures so that you know what the projects were about, and then I'll summarize the findings that there were in the different projects. So I found two actually about nuclear reactors. One that actually had costs of 336% more than they wanted, and it's still not clear. So in 2 years it's gonna be put still again, and no, it's already still, but they are going to with nuclear reactors you cannot just delete the database and it's gone. It's a bit more complicated than that, and the costs of that are not even in there. Then we had another nuclear reactor that even had costs of 494%, and it wasn't even finished. Then we have the concert hall, also in Germany, Elbphilharmonie, where it's actually not clear how long it can be used still because of it's a dangerous construction situation. And then you have something from Bavaria, where I've been living the last 7 years, where they wanted to introduce a toll collect system. So it's not about building something or so, but just about introducing a new legal system where you see a cost increase of 1,000 something %. So what do we see in all these projects? Well, what we typically see or what we found in those projects were different factors that mostly went to back to non-flexibility to reacting to change. So especially for the nuclear plants, it was really difficult to cope with the changing environment, because as you know, like 40 years ago, nobody had a problem with nuclear power, or maybe 40 years ago they started to, but the majority wouldn't budge because of that. While nowadays we know it's really difficult, it's not sustainable, it's not renewable, and it has some dangers. So the majority opinions skipped, but the project was just running way too long and was not able to adapt to that. Another point that was important was that we see, for example, here in the last slide I still have the toll collect, they tried to keep things secret. and that made it really, really difficult to align with all of the stakeholders. And that meant whenever they would come with a new suggestion, everyone would disagree. So they would say, okay, thanks for the feedback, and they would go back and yeah, think again, try again, but yeah, still not disclose anything that they didn't have to disclose. And I think these are things that we also see in our daily projects where we are. So what conclusions can we make from that? To avoid mistakes sounds, of course, short-term always like a good option. Like me in this talk, in the beginning, I would have liked to avoid that mistake with starting the presentation late. That would have been nice, and I'm sure none of you would say that would have been a bad thing. Yet, what happens if we focus, if we optimize for avoiding mistakes? And I'm sure you know as well. What happens when we focus on avoiding mistakes? You can reply in the chat or in audio. Oh, you make mistakes. That's an interesting one. Yeah, so the avoidance of mistakes brings even more mistakes about. That's true. You don't do anything. You're being careful. Yeah, true. Postpone decisions or actions. Yeah. You don't risk anything. Indeed. Increase of, yes. So very good points that you have there. You don't innovate, you're not creative anymore. It's really true. So what you typically see, the less you are allowing for mistakes, the more you try to plan. And at the end, ultimately, you know, the best way to not 100% sure not to make a mistake is indeed not to do anything. So that's from an avoiding mistakes perspective, that is the perfect thing to do. Just don't do anything. Then you also cannot be wrong. Yeah, that's boring. And it's also, so we humans all have something that we strive for, achieving. That we want to do. We want to contribute to each other's lives. We have a mission that we want to follow. Of course, we also have maybe phases where it's okay not to do anything, but just for us as a human being, that is not a fulfilling life. So we live for doing something, achieving something. And if we only put our focus on avoiding these mistakes, yeah, then we are over planning and in the end sacrificing what we actually want. Yes, and that's then typically how we end up, because if we focus on all the mistakes that we could make, yeah, that is overwhelming, because there's always an infinite possibility of what mistakes there are to make on all levels. So then what? What is the solution? Yeah, and since the definition of failure is already including success, I also looked up the definition of success, which is the achieving of the results wanted or hoped for. I found it slightly ironic that in the examples that we have there, we have the success of almost any project depends largely on its manager. I think in our context, we probably would like to replace it by leader, then it would be easier to go along with it. But anyway, and the other examples were all, again, about negative. So I'm not having much success. The success rate is very low. I'm doing this so far without success. So there we also see how conservative, how cautious, the underlying attitude there is of, I mean, did I say Oxford in the beginning? Yeah. So the Cambridge Dictionary, that is really, one of the most trusted sources for the English language. So I find it interesting. Anyway, then indeed, I also analyzed a few successful projects, and I consolidated a few things that they had in common. One factor, we also heard about that earlier already, is autonomy. The free choice of processes and tools for the teams, management as servant leaders and not as hierarchical despots, and motivation as connecting force. We could also name that individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Sounds familiar. Another factor was stakeholder management. So they had plannings and discussions with their stakeholders that were based on risks. So it was a risk-driven approach. They used use cases as common currency, meaning it didn't matter if a team would estimate in man days or in story points or in t-shirt sizes or in whatever. But they would be aligning on use cases that would unite them. So there they would discuss about what needs to happen in order for us to use this and what is our best guess of when we can start using that. And that was how they based their discussions. And then indeed also when there were requirements already upfrontly specified, like we saw in Michaela's talk about the katas in stage 2. Still flexibility in handling these specifications when later on the environment changed. Also this I've heard before, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So I'm sure that rings familiar for you as well. We've already seen and heard about that 2 times at least here. And join. Who knows what I'm aiming at here? Come on, I know you know it. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Where does that come from? Yes, the manifesto. Thank you, Peter. So indeed, that slide you've seen of, yes, there it comes. Very good, the manifesto. So I'm not going to go into this more because I think we've talked about it already enough. But indeed, so something that united all these successful projects that I analyzed was that they actually used the Agile principles. They wouldn't have phrased it that way, all of them, and they wouldn't even have considered themselves maybe as Agile, but they were. Yeah, and this one I'm really now going over because we've heard about that already a lot from Michaela, Edwin, and Maerz. One point I think that is still really interesting is to differentiate between failure and bugs or mistakes. So in order to succeed on the big picture, on the long run, it's important to allow yourself to fail on small steps, so to have bugs in the beginning. And indeed, the empirical method, the scientific method of having a hypothesis, falsifying it, having the transparency to see where we are and being able to inspect and adapt, of course, is really important to that. And one more example. That's something I'm gratefully allowed to use from Olivier Costa, who used that at a meetup last year. He did an analysis of 2 branches, healthcare and air travel, where they analyzed the death rates. And actually only, it's of course this year it's only going to intensify. So this was already created last year. But you can see that in healthcare, where we actually all rely in, where we put our trust in, where we think we are safe, actually 400,000 people a year die only in the US because of medical errors. That's a lot. And in air travel, where we think there are many people that are afraid maybe to board a plane because we always hear of them crashing or some getting lost and so on. Well, in the last 20 years, we have declined from 600 to 500 deaths per year. That is way less. Yeah, and one of the reasons that they could find for that, yes, indeed, Michaela, the availability bias. One of the reasons that you can identify there is that while in air travel, every single incident that happens is analyzed thoroughly and is not let go before they have a result, before they know what happened and why it went wrong. The other tries rather to hide their results. So of course, that's also not true everywhere and with everyone. I don't mean to say everyone in healthcare is hiding their mistakes. But in general, if you look at the public opinion, if you hear what happens, what does the public think when we know that there was a medical error? How does the public react?
We accept that the risk outweighs the benefit, that the benefits outweigh the risk, and that we just we accept that happens and then move on.
Okay, but if you hear in clinic this and that, we had so many patients dying because of a medical error, what's your first thought?
Yeah, we'd probably shy away from that specific hospital, but not from the others.
Indeed, I would even go further maybe. And so in this first impulsive reaction, I might even say, "Boah, that must have been a bad doctor." While I might not think the same about the pilot when a plane is crashing. Of course, there we also see sometimes examples that go otherwise, exceptions from that. But I think indeed in medicine we are more going for the doctor. It's the doctor's fault or it's the hospital's fault, and less about the process and the technology involved. In medicine, there's also a lot of technology where it would be easier to objectify the root causes of things. All right. So, but that's all in the outer world. Let's now see how this fear of failure also impacts you. Who can honestly say no to all three questions that you're seeing here on screen now? One being, do you ever put off doing something because you're not sure how it will turn out? Do you avoid situations where you will have to try something new in front of people? Have you ever put off doing something you know will improve your life, even though you have no good reason not to do it? Also reminds me a lot of the habit discussions we had with Michaela and also in the starting keynote. So is there anyone who can say honestly no to all three questions? Okay, just no. Very good. Okay, I was just otherwise about to falsify the hypothesis of just technical problems and no one replying, but you did that for me, Ken, thanks. Indeed, so yeah, this fear of failure is something that affects us all to some extent. So why is it so difficult to embrace failure? And that is, yeah, the second part now, the psychological part of the presentation. Well, we all have a superego in us that is really strong. It really helps us to get through life. Without it, we would, without our superego, we would not know what are the norms in our world, what are the standards by which we, if we comply to them, how we can survive. If we think of traffic, for example, we need to know how the others react, how we are expected to react. But the superego does not always consider everything of our situation, and especially some practices like failing, that is at the first moment always super scary and we want not to fail if we have the option. But in the end, we all agree it's still necessary. And in these kind of situations, the superego is really not helpful. Why not? There are three psychological effects behind it that make it difficult to deal with the superego. So the superego need number one is to be perfect. In no way can we allow ourselves to see us not as perfect, because then we are maybe not, we lose our faith in being equipped to survive. We must believe in ourselves. And our superego says, well, for that you need to be perfect. You cannot be allowed any weakness, and certainly can you not allowed to be mediocre, average. You need to be special. So that is one need that we need to conquer. Anyone an idea of how we can do that? What can help that superego to become a little bit more patient with us?
The realization, according to the bell curve, that about 70% of us is mediocre.
Indeed. No one is perfect, I see in the chat. Yes, completely right. And indeed, it's not about being flawless. Listen to genuine feedback, embrace vulnerability. That's a very good one, yeah. So it's not about being perfect. It's about appreciating the imperfection. So maybe we are not the peacock that is super beautiful and can rightfully bask in all kinds of vanity. Maybe we are the duck, but hey, if you look at it, the head of the duck also has these like shiny blue feathers, and it's actually also pretty, right? So by practicing to appreciate the imperfection in ourselves, but also in others, we can help our superego to get over it a little bit, to allow us also to be a little bit less perfect without starting to scream at us. A second need of the superego that makes it really difficult to embrace failure is it wants us to keep our dreams untouched. It wants us to keep our dreams untouched. I think that is a bit of a more surprising one, at least it was to me in the beginning. What does it mean if our dreams stay untouched? So sometimes we say dreams are like soap bubbles, and also equally, yeah, it means they are not realized indeed. So they are something precious. They are something that keeps us going. Yeah? They say hope dies last. If everything else disappears, we can live without it, but we cannot live without hope. We need hope. We need dreams to strive for in order to keep our will to survive up. So, but what happens when we start reaching for dreams? Any ideas? What happens then?
We go out of our comfort zone and start to improve.
Yeah, but what happens to the dream?
Well, it either succeeds or fails and gets replaced by another dream.
Yeah, no, but that's not an automatism. In the beginning, so let's say either you reach the dream or not. And indeed, that's an important differentiation. But in either way, what happens if you succeed? You make your dream come true. To that dream, it's not a dream anymore. Of course, you can keep pursuing it. If your dream is, for example, to have a loving family, which is, I'm sure, a dream that many of us have. You can maybe already have a loving family, and living the dream means to keep pursuing that, but it's not the same. It's not something, or if you want this dream to stay relevant, then you need to make a new dream out of it again and again. It's not because you once had a loving family or you once maybe married happily or so, that this is something that you can follow for the rest of your life. No, it can maybe stay valid for your whole life, but only if you make a new dream out of it. And what is the other hand? What happens if, maybe we strive for that dream, but again, the dream gets crushed, not because we achieve it, but because maybe it's not really what we want. And that is something that for our superego is really, really threatening, because anyway, it doesn't matter what happens. As soon as we start pursuing our dreams, these dreams become threatened. How often do we figure out that we try to pursue a dream and it's not as we imagined? And then we stand there and we feel empty and we don't know what to do. For our superego, that is really, really a big danger. So, but indeed, Peter, you already said it. What can we do to counter this need? We can create new dreams. Yeah, indeed, we can. I see in the chat, we can see our dreams as backlog items for what we want to achieve in life. And the product will only be pursued as long as there are still backlog items in the backlog. Yeah? And I think that's what the superego is afraid of, that we're going to run out. And there is a third need that is more applicable even to enterprise contexts. That is to avoid bullying or also to maintain the status. So whenever we fail, we know we are afraid that it will be seen as weakness, that our social status will be threatened, and that ultimately our survival will be threatened because we are going to be bullied by those who are stronger than we are. And I think that is something we see a lot in hierarchical situations. But it's also something we already see with our kids in school. So that is indeed something that is really deep in the evolution. But that is one point where it's rather easy to make it easier to embrace failure also for those around us, because the first two are more about us, more about ourselves. So the first one about having a standard towards ourselves that we need to be perfect. That's really difficult to improve for someone else. Of course, you can be a living example, but it's you self in the first place who will benefit from it. And also the second one, of course, when you have a lot of dreams, in the picture before, you make a lot of beautiful soap bubbles and everyone can admire them. That might maybe inspire someone else to create new bubbles as well. But it's really here in the avoid bullying that we can actively contribute to the others and also help them create more trust in making failures, because when we see their weakness, when we see that they make failures, we are not starting to attack them. But what can we do? Bullying, pesten. So with what I mean with bullying is indeed that someone who is stronger senses the weakness and starts to use that weakness to position himself. So, and what I can do to counter this is actually something that Björn already wrote in the chat. It's to embrace vulnerability. So when I look at this figure here of these acrobats, that is a very vulnerable position they are in. If you imagine now, I don't know, someone attacking, they would hardly be able to defend themselves or do something. Even if nothing from the outside goes wrong, it's already difficult to maintain this. Yet there's beauty in this, right? There's strength in this. So it's really about so if you could imagine, let's say we would be all stretchable like this. Let's say if you imagine we can actually take up this position, who would feel comfortable being one of these if it would not be a physical problem? Anyone? Björn, you would like to be everyone? Okay. I'm not sure. So I would need to feel safe. I would not, if I imagine I'm in Brussels, in the middle of Brussels, I would not position myself as one of those, because I would really not feel comfortable standing there like that. So this is indeed about creating environments where it's okay to be vulnerable and where we know that we will not be attacked because of that. So, time is almost up, right, Deria?
Yep, just one more minute, but if you want to wrap up, just take your time.
Yeah, okay. So what I would really like still for each of you to do, if there's nothing really, really urgent in questions, because for questions I'm happy to be available also out of the session. but just to take something along still into your lives. So if you think of your current stance in life, what can you see of these three mechanisms? Which mechanism of your superego is an impediment for you right now? Is it being perfect? Is it keeping your dreams untouched? Is it to avoid bullying? And when you have something, to then think of next week and to really set an intent for a small step to appreciate your imperfection, to create a new dream, or to embrace vulnerability. And I would love to hear if something comes to your mind, something that you could try, thinking of this now like that. I would love to hear about it in the chat or out loud. Is there anything that you can think of that you could do to unlock your potential that could help you to create a failure culture either for yourself or for people around you?
Share je straks? Dat is goed, ik ga de vorige discussie dan volgen. Okay.
Say no more often. Mm-hmm. To believe in yourself. All right, nice. So since the time is up, what is left to me is only to invite you to really think about something very concrete that you can take out of this and to try it out, to use the experimental method to try out how your life feels when you try to appreciate your imperfection, when you try to create new dreams or embrace your vulnerability. All right. Yes, time is up. So all that is left to say for me is thanks.
Thank you, Anke. Very interesting. As Anke said as well, she's always available for questions or a discussion after the talk. So you can always reach out to her. Thank you very, very much for that presentation. Anke was very thought-provoking. All right, next up is Francis Lalamon at 4:10. He's already present, I see. Welcome, Francis. He will be bringing Why Don't You Get My Goat? So hope to see you then. Thank you.